We'll get started at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dharma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it forever. Swaha. All right. So off we go. So the title of this is The Path to Truths. So you can probably figure it out. It's all about what you know as the Four Noble Truths, which of course includes the Eightfold Path. I use the Four Ennobling Truths because I like to remind myself that these are action points. But we're going to get into that today. Because the Four Ennobling Truths, these aren't something just to be believed. Ooh, I agree with those. I started my Buddhist journey exactly that way, with the idea that, well, I agree with that, but for many years it didn't go much further than that. Because the ennobling truths, they don't call for just faith, nor are they just simple principles that can lend themselves to simple explanations. The awakened one, the Buddha, He isn't offering truths in order to get us to get on a path. What he's doing is he's offering a path that will lead us to the truths. So, in other words, we have to do some work, right? So the path is a challenge. It's a challenge for us to take action. Excuse me. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, or what is known as the first turning of the Dharma wheel, Siddhartha offered his first teachings of this new perspective of the Hindi Sanatana Dharma. This was a paradigm shift that exchanged a model of deific reliance for one of personal responsibility. From doing for the betterment of self to being what is better for all beings, including the self. We don't want to leave ourselves out, right? Siddhartha awakened to the Four Ennobling Truths, and he considered these teachings as primary to realizing the fundamental nature of the universe. The insights reflected in this particular sutra describe the condition of the world now, but also in his and in our lifetime. This was not, though, an assertion of any sort of permanent truth. Rather than making truth claims, he offers the realizations of his own experiences as guides to responding more effectively to the lives that human beings lead, human beings like us. This is a critical factor in understanding the whole of Buddhist philosophy, that how we respond must be dynamic, and it must be appropriate to the situation, to the time, and to the culture that we find ourselves in. And even though these ideals arose over 2,600 years ago, Siddhartha is describing the world as it is now. And this is so we can find ways to neutralize its unwholesome expressions. And goodness, those are all around us, right? So it's not sufficient to only accept the reality of the Four Ennobling Truths. We can't just, again, say, ooh, well, I agree with that. That is only appropriate view. The truths must be experienced as tasks that need to be accomplished in order to live as an engaged human being. In each of these, there are tasks to perform. There are actions to take in order that we can fully realize the value of this knowledge. And this is knowledge that experience will transform into wisdom. That's how we get to wisdom. We take knowledge, we work with it, and it becomes wisdom. So I want to look at each of the four, and that's what we're going to do today. But we're going to look at them as, again, tasks or action items, if you will. And the first one is the reality of suffering. This is what is looked at as the first of the ennobling truths, though we could do them in pretty much any order, and it's still the same deal. So number one is inherent in human life is suffering, or what you've heard called dukkha. Suffering is things like unsatisfactoriness. You know, sometimes we're just not satisfied with the way things are going in our lives. This, a lot of times, as people would describe it as an emptiness, maybe, that they feel. Well, that's unsatisfactoriness. And then there's discontent. There's, ooh, man, things just aren't going the way I want them to go. And then there's anguish, and that's just simple pain. It might be psycho-emotional pain, pain that we cause ourselves mentally. It may be physical pain. These are all suffering. This is all things that account to suffering. But what's the task, right? These are action items. So the task then is we have to make the effort so we can fully comprehend what suffering is, both for ourselves and for others. There must arise in us a sense of encompassing empathy for all beings. It sounds a lot easier than it is to do. And because to do it, contrary to what many believe of Buddhist philosophy and practice, we have to embrace, all aspects of human existence. We've got to do suffering and joy, pain and pleasure, illness and health, and others, because these are the realities. The realities of suffering, they don't just arise from the bad stuff or what we consider the bad stuff. It can arise from that good stuff too. So we have to practice, we can't avoid suffering, whether it's our own or others. We have to practice ways of empathizing with that suffering. Some people find it a lot easier to empathize with the suffering of others than their own suffering. That's something you got to get past too. Then there's others that say my suffering means more to me than the suffering of others. You got to get past that too. We need some equanimity. My suffering, their suffering, it's the same thing. It may come in different flavors, may come from different directions, but it's all suffering, no matter where it arises from. Oh, excuse me again. Number 2, the causes of suffering. The root cause of suffering is craving. Seems pretty cut and dried. But craving, we've got to root it out of the body-mind. We have to find it, take it out. Craving manifests in how we view and how we respond to life's challenges, with behaviors that arise from clinging to unwholesome habitual reactivities and from an unnatural desire for permanence in an existence that is constantly undergoing transformations. So what's the task? A practitioner, that's you and I, we must develop insight into our own cravings and then honestly assess their value. Remember, this is all about unnatural cravings, right? Cravings, we can also put desire in there and goals. We often hear these words connected. So we have good goals, right? We have positive goals and we have positive things that we're looking to do. We've just got to make sure they don't become cravings, because what is first viewed as a craving, what is first viewed as a craving might actually be a wholesome goal, or it might equally be a craving for one that is unwholesome. We have to discern that for ourselves. We have to discern the difference, and that's the task. What's wholesome? What's unwholesome? I have to say it. Is this easy? No. Is it of great value to us as human beings? Oh, yeah. And number 3 is the cessation of suffering. Due to the causal nature of the universe, that things are always affecting other things, and there's always transformations and changes going on and all that, because of causal conditioning, the cessation or the alleviation of suffering is possible. Because if things can change from good to bad, then of course they can change from bad to good. I've got a big frog in my throat today. But what's the task here? Right? Cessation of suffering. Well, there are 3 characteristics of existence. And not just human existence, everything's existence. There's impermanence, not self, and suffering. Everything's affected by impermanence. And us as human beings, we're affected by the whole not self thing. And then pretty much everything is affected by suffering in one way or another. But we focus on human suffering. Suffering arises as the reality of impermanence affects a sense of self-permanence. I'm always going to be the same person I am. I'm never going to change. And then when the change happens, it affects you, right? It causes suffering. So suffering is alleviated when the realities of impermanence and of a not self, and that's that self that transforms in the midst of every moment that experience, is realized. A practitioner gains insight into these truths through appropriate action and appropriate effort. There's the Eightfold Path kind of jumping in. And then number 4 is there is a path to the cessation of suffering. The practice of the middle way, the Eightfold Path, that is the path. And that's what the title of this talk is referring to, the path to truths. Because the Buddha wasn't going to make it easy for us. That'd take all the fun out of it. So the fourth task then is, like a farmer weeds a field so that only the desired crops will grow. So too does a practitioner like you and I need to weed the unwholesome habits and dispositions from our body minds. But we don't stop there. Because then we got this extra room, right? So we want to plant and tend our wholesome habits and dispositions. And these are the kind of things, both the weeding and the planting, that can lead us to those moments of enlightenment or those moments of realization. But this is not a remedy, and it certainly is not a cure. It is a path. It's a guideline, or it's a guide that was experienced and verified by Siddhartha. And then he offers it to us as a design that can take us from how we think we are to how we imagine we can be. So there you go. There's the Four Ennobling Truths. But of course, it's the Eightfold Path where the practice comes in. And these are the practices that will help us with the tasks of the other three ennobling truths. The Eightfold Path is often called the middle way. In fact, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, that's exactly what the Buddha calls it, is the middle way, the Eightfold Path. And it's a practical guideline to ethical and mental development with the goal of freeing the individual from engaging unwholesome habitual reactivities and strengthening the wholesome ones. Seems like a good goal. It constitutes the foundation of Buddhist ethical character and moral action. Great emphasis is placed on the practical aspect because only through a commitment to practice can we attain a state of being that will benefit both ourselves and others. The 8 aspects of the path are not to be understood as a sequence of single steps. Instead, they are interconnected and interdependent principles that must be realized and practiced in relationship with each other. There's a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called The Heart of Buddha's Teaching. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. And in there, Master Han offers that view is the most important. Right? It's the first one of the Eightfold Path. And view is the most important one to begin your practice with. And he is not wrong. But we keep in mind that as we practice view, we're practicing all the others anyway. And as we practice any of the others, we're practicing view too. But again, if you haven't read The Heart of Buddha's Teaching, highly recommend it. Now, in most descriptions of the Eightfold Path, we encounter the word right. As in right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, all these. And in engaged Dharma, we skillfully redescribe the ideal to the word appropriate. And earlier, before we started, we were talking about how we change words, but we don't change intent. We change the language, but not the intent. And that's what we do here. So from right action then becomes appropriate action. And we do this for a reason. Each direction of the Eightfold Path needs to be considered situationally. For example, we need to focus on taking what action is appropriate in a given situation. Because it can't always be the same action, even though we may be looking at a similar situation. Because an action that may work in one situation may be inappropriate and could even be harmful in another situation, even though they seem similar. We are seeking the most positive, goal-oriented outcomes based on each unique situation. Actions are focused on promoting human flourishing, that good old happiness, health, and harmony that I talk about a lot. We're looking for a state of social harmony, personal and social health, personal and social happiness, or contentment, if you prefer. And should any of our actions result in negative and or useless consequences, we have the responsibility to work to fix the situation, when and if it's possible. Because we accept that it's not always possible to fix it. But we at least want to think about it. We want to have that intent, and then we find out it's not possible, we have to accept it. And then we have to move on. We must seek to perform situational amelioration with the intent to correct any of the unwholesome consequences of our actions. I probably should say it again. Is this easy? No. Is it of great value? Oh yeah. So I want to present the Eightfold Path. I'm sure all you guys have probably looked it up or you have books on it and all that. The first two are view and intention. And these are the path to wisdom and knowledge. To have the right view and to have the right intent in what you do. This is how we develop knowledge and wisdom. Then there's speech, action, and livelihood. And this is all about ethics. This is how we develop our ethical character, and this is how we're able to perform the moral actions that we'll need to perform as we go through life. And then there's effort, mindfulness, concentration. And these are both meditative practices or meditative parts of the Eightfold Path, but they also point us to equanimity, to balance, because we make the effort to find that balance, and we're mindful that we're looking for that, and we concentrate on that goal, if you will. So I'm going to take each one of them one at a time, starting, of course, with view. We'll do that in honor of Master Han. From view, intention arises. So seeking an appropriate view of each situation is really important. All phenomena are interconnected and interdependent. So our view must encompass as much of the, call it inter, as can possibly be recognized. Can you recognize it all? No. But we do our best. That's our goal. We try to become aware of how we, as both the individual expressions of the universe that we are, and members of society, are both cause and effect through our actions. Basically, what we do matters. So we work to skillfully redescribe our dispositions and our experience, to see ourselves as we really are, see reality as it really is, not how we want it to be, and see others how they are, not how we might want them to be. Appropriate view is the path to effectively engaging each unique moment that we find ourselves in. Then there's appropriate intention. Intention is our basis for all the actions that we take. We do not take an action without intent. The deal is, we want to make sure we know what the intent is. We want it to be a conscious intent, not some unwholesome, unconscious intent. How we choose to respond in any situation must be determined with an appropriate view, and then we act on it with that appropriate intent. And in some situations, intent, we're able to develop it over a period of time. Think about it. Look at the options, if you will. And then we could say, okay, this is going to be my intent when I take this action. But there's other moments when we don't have very long to figure out what our intent needs to be. We've got that short time period we've got to work with. And we have to learn to do both. We have to practice both. Regardless of time, intent is going to reveal itself in how we choose to act, not in the results of our actions. Because wholesome intent does not always lead to wholesome results. And unwholesome intent does not always lead to unwholesome results either. We have the obligation, once we step onto the path, to be mindful of our thoughts, and of our intentions as they arise. And in this way, we can work to achieve the best of intentions, those intentions that again will promote human flourishing. So view and intent, knowledge, wisdom. Then we get to speech. And boy, there's a lot of that goes on in today's society in so many different ways. So we must be mindful of the language we use to ensure that it does not create unnecessary conflict, and that it is clear and concise in its meaning. We just need to do our best to do that, because in this way we can avoid misinterpretation of our intent and of our actions. Appropriate effort and mindfulness are practiced within this practice so that non-productive or unwholesome phrases, for example, fall away, and productive and unwholesome words and phrases arise. In our culture, in this Western culture, whether it's Europe, whether it's the US, and I see it arising so much more too in the Far East and places like Japan and stuff too now. There are so many different ways that we talk to one another, so many different modes, that we really have to be extra mindful. Then there's action. We need to be modest. This is one of our actions. Be modest. Be humble. But do not allow ourselves to be abused. Find balance there. That's why the whole equanimity thing comes in. We have fun, for example, but we don't have fun at the expense of others. This is an appropriate action. We live life to the fullest, but not to the detriment of our Buddhist practice. This is appropriate action. Action is a critical component as we go through our lives and try to exercise situational ethics. Make the best decision possible given the situation we find ourselves in. Again, appropriate action. The next is livelihood. Appropriate livelihood reflects our appropriate view and our sense of respect and responsibility that we extend even to our environment. Much less extend it to others, but also to our environment. However, we got to understand that not everyone, for example, can change jobs in order to dogmatically observe the ideal of appropriate livelihood. Because in some instances, it may more come to how we act within a job or within a livelihood rather than the label that's placed on that livelihood. And we can discover ways to make our jobs more appropriate. Take some mindfulness, take some awareness, take some effort, take some mindfulness, take some concentration. We can do our jobs with different intention, if that's what it's called for. Now, those of you that have been around for a while, you know that I added something to this whole livelihood thing, and that's livelihood. L-I-F-E versus L-I-V-E, livelihood. We got to consider it. Livelihood, this is what we do and how we act outside of our job or our career. What hobbies we do, what interests we have, what entertainments do we pursue. This is just as important, an appropriate livelihood, because it equally reflects the depth of our Buddhist practice. And I'm sure you can think, there are wholesome hobbies and there are unwholesome hobbies. There are wholesome entertainments and there are unwholesome entertainments. There are wholesome interests and there are unwholesome interests. You can figure it out yourself. You're all pretty dang smart. And then effort. Every element on the Eightfold Path requires that we put in appropriate effort, or we couldn't get it done. We must make all effort to engage our actions, for example, with good intent. and we must exert effort to commit ourselves completely to whatever we are doing, and then do it to the best of our ability. Siddhartha taught that there are 4 great efforts that we have to make in life. The effort to develop. Right? We need to develop our minds, we need to develop our bodies, we need to develop our morals and our ethics, for example. Then we have to do the effort to avoid, to let go of those unwholesome dispositions and habits, those habitual reactivities that we have. And then we have to make the effort to maintain. Right? We all know how hard it is. Let's take losing weight, for example. We want to maintain that lower weight. We know how hard that is to do. That takes effort. And that's where the 4th one comes in, the effort to overcome those unwholesome habitual reactivities, those unwholesome thoughts and actions, those unwholesome entertainments or those interests that we might have. So we have these 4 great efforts. That's a lot of work, or a lot of effort. We work to develop the depth and the scope of our understanding and experience so we can meet these ideals. When we employ sustained effort, we are giving strength to appropriate practice of view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, mindfulness, and concentration. Again, the Eightfold Path is all interconnected and interdependent on one another. Can't do one without doing the others. Mindfulness. Hear this word a lot these days. We remain aware of our body-mind at all times. And we do this so we can ensure that we continue to reduce the unwholesome effects of our actions. We practice awareness cultivation, both during meditation on the cushion, but also off the cushion. When we're out in the world, when we're living our lives, we work to realize that each situation we find ourselves in is unique. And then we work to find ways to apply skillful means so we can develop excellence in our practice. Human excellence. Aristotle was all into that human excellence thing. And lastly is concentration. Once we achieve a high degree of concentration in our practice, then we have truly stepped on the path that leads us to the cessation of unsatisfactoriness, discontent, and anguish. Because we free ourselves from our habitual reactions of things like attraction, a natural attraction to things, or aversion, where we start using the words like hate, and then indifference, like, I don't care, let it happen, who cares? We don't want any of those. Acceptance of the path leads us from an intellectual understanding of appropriate view to a more direct, intuitive experience. And then on to the achievement of the cessation of suffering. Sounds good. So the Eightfold Path then is a guide to actions that we as practitioners must take in the midst of each unique situation that we encounter in each unique moment. Traditionally, Master Ihai Dogen, he defined a moment as the time it takes to snap your fingers. I think it's 1/75th of a second or something like that. And you can imagine how difficult it would be to remain mindful of the Eightfold Path in each moment under that kind of constraint. Think about keeping your mindfulness, your awareness, that fast. Instead, think of moments in a different way, in a more skillful way, as the situation you find yourself in. Some are brief, like that, and they got to be responded to immediately. But then other moments can span broader amounts of time, giving opportunities for contemplation before we have to make decisions. So here's an example. If you're driving down the road and a car suddenly pulls out in front of you, you've only got a moment to make a decision. Boom, appropriate action. What do I do? Slam on the brakes, swerve, whatever it is. But If you find out you have cancer, then you've got a long moment to deal with. Right? It may be months, it may be years that you have to deal with that moment. It kind of brings a whole new, more appropriate view to this idea. Now, the Eightfold Path can also help you more fully understand the past, which will help you positively transform the now. Engaging rigorous self-honesty requires that you determine what view, what intent, and so forth, that resulted in whatever actions you took in the past, whether they were wholesome or unwholesome. And it is important that rigorous self-honesty isn't only applied to what you think you may have had, or what you think may have had negative results. You got to equally look at and honestly evaluate those actions that you took that were more positive. Strive for equanimity. Strive for balance in how you view yourself. And this leads to equanimity in how you view the world around you. So the Four Noble Truths, while they are wonderful to accept, when you look at them and you say, okay, that really makes sense to me, you cannot stop there. There's actions that have to be taken, tasks that have to be performed. And not just once. You're not just taking a test, checking off the answers, and then hand it in to the teacher. Because the teacher in this case is the universe, and it doesn't want a copy of your test. It just wants you to keep testing. And the Eightfold Path is a way, as a guide, to help us succeed in that. To help us succeed in understanding that we all suffer in one way or another, and that craving is a big part of that suffering. Craving is at the core of it. But then there is that path out. That path to the alleviation of suffering, the Eightfold Path. And if you put your work into practicing or engaging the Eightfold Path in the best possible way you can, you will be accomplishing those other three tasks in the midst of it. And that's kind of the beauty of this whole thing that the Buddha offered us, is it seems like different pieces that you have to put together, but it's all really just one package. It's just up to you to open it up and work with it.